Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donohoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Ann and Louis talked to someone who can now officially be considered a friend of The Green Rush because this marks his second appearance on our show. Alan Brochstein is founder of 420 Investor, a community of cannabis investors, as well as New Cannabis Ventures, one of the top sources on the internet for investment-focused cannabis news. Alan is a unique voice in the industry because he was the first investment professional to make a career out of covering the cannabis industry from an investor's perspective. When he speaks, investors listen. We hope you will too. Don't sit back, lean forward. And now, onto the show.
Welcome back, Alan. It's been, now 7-8 months since we last talked. Thank you so much for coming back and chatting with Ann and I.
That's my pleasure. So this is like 3 years in cannabis space, right?
Oh, man. At least, yes. You know, they say dog years. I mean, cannabis years are a lot rougher. So back in November when we talked with you, you were really bullish on cannabis companies, and you said that we were in either the top of the first or the bottom of the first inning, using a baseball analogy. Do you still feel the same way? Do you still feel it's extremely early, or like dog years, that the markets have evolved really, really quickly?
Yeah, well, we're not in the first inning, that's for sure. And I think a lot of my bullishness at a year ago, or not a year ago, in November, was partially because California was legalizing. I saw a trade ahead, and that played out really well until it didn't, obviously. But the markets caught fire in late October when Canopy and Constellation announced their deal, and it kind of caught everybody off guard. And one of the things that made me bullish was I thought that was a real big positive for the industry, and it was going to tell a lot of companies that if they want to get into the cannabis space, here's a way to do it. And oh, by the way, you better move fast. And maybe it's not so ironic that today Molson announced a deal with, they call themselves Hexo now, but it's still legally Hydropothecary in Canada. So that's the template, that whole Canadian thing. But we've seen a lot more of these cross-border deals. And there's so much going on in terms of interest shifting now into the United States. So we're definitely in later innings in Canada, I would say, and very early innings all the way around the world. And then the U.S., I would say, is now coming out of preseason. Maybe that's the way I would describe it. Things have really changed.
Great baseball analogy.
Yeah.
Good job with that one.
And by the way, we're recording this on August 1st for everybody listening.
There you go.
The day after the Mets lost 25 4. But I digress. Sorry, Louis.
So you get for not liking Yankees. Come on.
It's true.
So can we talk a little bit about what you think investors should do, and looking at Canada, for example? So 2018 has been a rough go for Canadian stocks. Companies like Aurora and Canopy have had some declines. Why do you think this is, and what should investors do?
Yeah, so in Canada, I think it's been very interesting. I've actually not been surprised. I was a little surprised at the beginning of the year because typically at the beginning of the year, we see some softness in the Canadian LPs. And I thought this year that would be the case as well. And we went off to the races on day one. It got wrapped up in that whole California legalization thing, and there was a mutual fund. There still is a mutual fund. The symbol's MJ, and you had basically a bunch of uninformed investors thinking they were investing in California, but really buying this silly mutual fund that was 50% LPs. And so that kind of got us off to an interesting start this year. And what we've seen is the same thing we seem to see every year, a lot of supply. And I think that's been the story this year. And we've seen a lot of equity capital raised in Canada. And then there have been some other issues as well. We've seen some delays. Most recently it wasn't that big, but if you go back to the beginning of the year, people really thought that the legalization was going to launch, by July 1st, and it was by Labor Day. Now it's October 17th, and I got to tell you, it's nasty. So this October 17th is nothing to celebrate. It's going to be scary. I've been saying that for a while, and my work shows not only is it going to be nasty because they don't have any stores open, there's no product. It's the biggest joke ever, but I digress. So you're asking what people should be doing. I think there was too much interest in this sector, and the prices just got too high. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but that's basically what happened. And
so is that Canadian prices? I mean, should they? Yeah. So should investors be looking more at companies like GTI or Ianthus or the other U.S. companies?
That are about to go public. Yeah. So I've been saying, I'm not telling people what to do necessarily, because I mean, at 420 Investor, yes, I kind of do that, but I don't really tell them what to do. I share my thoughts and they do what they want to do. I don't think people should necessarily dump their Canadian holdings and go buy American. I see something bigger going on. I see a much bigger market with a lot more opportunity and, yes, more risk right now because of the regulatory uncertainty. But people are opening up to it. And really, the things changed in April. And that was when Senator Gardner and President Trump apparently came to this agreement that's been, they've talked about it twice now. So it's only as good as it appears to be. We'll see.
As the last tweet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but no matter how important that ultimately turns out to be, it was a catalyst for a sea change in investor sentiment. And all of a sudden, everybody's waking up to this huge valuation gap. And I always tell people the U.S. companies, on apples to apples comparisons, which don't really exist, by the way, should be cheaper because of things like 280E, federal illegality, lack of international opportunities. It's a pretty long list of things.
How about lack of cross-state opportunity?
Well, hey, I'm going to tell you something maybe your listeners don't understand. This exists in Canada, too. It's unbelievable. There you have a whole country, but it's broken down into all this provincial stuff, and you have to get your contract with Ontario. You have to get your contract with Quebec. It's really, that's not as big a deal as you think it is. There's no advantage in Canada, even though there should be. They for some reason, they've taken the worst of the U.S. The only thing the U.S. has better than Canada, from what I can tell, is a better product set. And actually, people say dealing with the regulators in some states is a little bit easier than dealing with Health Canada.
So if you had to compare U.S. and Canada, would you say that the U.S. is more right-sized now? Or given all the dysfunctionality you just mentioned?
Right-sized, what do you mean?
I guess so. The valuations, yeah.
No. So, well, okay, look, we're talking about relative. So no, the answer is no. On absolute, I'm like the last guy you want to say, what's the right value for GTI or MedMen? Because I'm going to always tell you probably that they're too high, and then they're going to just keep going up probably. So the CFA in me will give you one answer, and then the armchair psychologist will give you a different answer. So that's the truth. So I think, to get back to your original question, what should investors be doing? And I'm not saying to dump Canada and buy the United States. The bigger trade here is people who have been left behind. They didn't participate in the Canadian blow up in prices, the good, when 10 baggers for these companies. They now see certain things about you can make money with cannabis stocks, and they can do it in their home market, which is 9 times bigger than Canada. And a year ago, there weren't success stories in the United States. If you were to look, oh my God, it trades in Canada? I don't know how to do that. Oh, wow, OTC, forget that. So we have these stories now where these companies like Canna Royalty, which is not a client, or MPX or Ianthus, which are clients of mine, the New Cannabis Ventures, where you can look at their stock chart over the last year or so, and you're like, wow, why didn't I own that? So I'm not saying they're necessarily going to buy that now, but when something like GTI comes along and they see, how it was valued against MedMen, that's the way people think. And all of a sudden, now everybody wants in on the next deal. And I think that's where we are in the United States. So I'm not saying that people should take their money out of Canada and start speculating in the United States. They should maybe do both. And the bigger driver is not going to be that dynamic. It's going to be your parents, your cousin, your brother-in-law, whatever it is. And believe me, I get these calls all the time and saying, hey, I heard about this company in the United States. What's going on? And there's just a lot of excitement right now. And, the U.S. public markets for cannabis stocks are really small if you think about it. And it's not like these companies are going to just magically grow to massive market caps. They're going to have to use their stock to make acquisitions, raise capital to fund build out to license. So it's not as easy as it sounds. But I think I tell people this is the time to really finally, we're here and you should be focused on the market.
So there are a lot of companies that are in the U.S. that are either going IPO on the OTC or the CSE, or they're going to back into shells through a reverse takeover. Which are the ones that you're most looking forward to for the rest of this year?
So, yeah, in the United States, there are, I don't know if I want to name names because I have to be really careful for one reason. Some of these it's not public yet, and others, I don't like to say this is the most exciting when I haven't looked at every single deal. So
how about this? I'll throw out a couple of names
Yep.
for companies that have already announced that they're either going or
Sure.
not.
So I don't know the valuation on Acreage Farms.
Yeah, so Acreage Holdings is one.
Acreage Holdings, sorry.
Right.
That's a different company, Acreage Holdings.
Yes.
Acreage Holdings. The thing that's interesting.
Paliatech is in the queue.
Sure.
There's a company called Forefront, which
a client of ours.
And they're all three happen to be clients of ours. But there are others.
There's a lot of them.
Like there's Lone Rogue out in Oregon,
Oregon, California, Nevada. Yep.
Right. So there are a couple of these companies that are either multi-state operators or
small regional. Yep.
Yeah. So who? I mean, you can name names
I'll
or
just
not.
put out there also. We have a client at New Cannabis Ventures, Cresco, out of Illinois. There's another company out of Illinois. These three companies, all out of Chicago. PharmaCann. These are all very exciting companies to me. I don't want to pick which one's the most exciting. I will say Acreage Holdings raising $119 million as a private placement kind of tells you where we are. So it's exciting in and of itself. Whether it's worth whatever the valuation is right now, I'm not even in a position to judge with the information I have. But that's obviously exciting. The fact that you can take a company like TerraTech, where the market cap right now is just a little bit higher than what Acreage raised in a private placement. So it just tells you that people are really excited. And I spoke to a company yesterday. They're out of Michigan, and they have, I would call them one of these regional players soon. And it just really opened my eyes that there are a lot of under the radar players that see this window open, and they're going to either merge into companies or they're going to go public and try to be consolidators. We're going to see a lot more of that. I can't guarantee that people are going to make money on each and every one of these, but I think when you look out a couple years from now, you're going to say, wow, I could have bought Canopy Growth 2 years ago today, kind of thing, for the United States. And we'll see who that is. I don't have the answer yet on who that is. So
speaking of mergers and acquisitions, you said that 2018 would be the year of M&A. You've proven to be correct.
I got one right for you.
So are you still bullish on M&A for this year, or you think it's going to slow down, or you think it's going to increase for 2019? Or is it just too far to look out?
Nope. I think it's going to be a continued big story. It's going to take many facets. We're seeing mergers of equals. We're seeing normal public to private type of consolidation, which is really the one I expect. These platforms in the United States, there's several that are publicly traded, and they, like Iambus and MPX, that are using their stock to do deals and to buy licenses or companies, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. It wouldn't surprise me to see GTI do some of that with the recent capital raise. So I think we're going to see a lot in the United States. I think in Canada, we're starting to see maybe some more mergers of equals. A good example would be Emblem, which just announced. That one wasn't so much equal. Better example.
No, but Aurora MedRelief is close to equal, right?
Aurora MedRelief wasn't really equal, but it was big and big. Yeah. So we've seen those types. I don't know if there's going to be any more Aurora type of acquisitions. Those have been very large deals consolidating the leaders. I expect to see more. Like this Abcan deal is a great example. The deal hasn't closed, but they just announced it, I believe, yesterday, that they're buying a private BC-based indoor grower. Abcan is giving up 1/3 of the combined company, and they're getting sales that are like 7 or 8 times their current sales. It's that's how you create value, in my opinion, by finding somebody, getting that private company valuation, and using your public stock. I expect to see a lot more of that in Canada and in the United States.
So it's interesting. It seems like almost all of the U.S. companies who are going public are going public on the Canadian Stock Exchange or the CSE.
It's the only way.
Or you could go public on the OTC.
No, I mean, yes, there's another choice. It's almost like you can drive on the right-hand side of the road like everybody in the UK or in the United States, or you can drive on the left-hand side if you want. You can do it. Yes, you can technically go on the CSE. I tell everybody that's a bad idea.
I mean the OTC.
Do you mean the OTC? Yeah.
What did I say?
You said the CSE.
Yeah, I'm sorry. OTC. But CSE, yes. OTC, no. There we go.
But it seems like the CSE, up until the last couple of years, was such a backwater exchange.
I know. Yeah, I agree with you. But it's there's no better option right now. So it's the best option, and it seems to be working. That exchange, they say it stands for the Cannabis Securities Exchange now. So it's instead of Canadian.
So as a U.S. retail investor, right? How are the disclosures the same? I mean, how do you evaluate companies on the CSE versus evaluating companies on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange?
Okay, but that's a good question because people should know the answer, but it's not a valid question because this isn't an alternative. If you're a U.S. cannabis company, you don't have that option. So the right question is, is the CSE on a disclosure basis worse than the OTC? And the answer is no. And here's the thing. If you're listing on the CSE, what do you get? You get bankers and research, so access to capital and research, and liquidity, I think. And then you also can get your OTC ticker. So your choices are basically CSE plus OTC or OTC only. And so we're seeing, some companies in the United States that are now looking to get that Canadian listing instead of being solely on the OTC. It's kind of interesting to see that. There's one example of where it's happening and it doesn't seem to be working. Signal Bay is what the name of the company was. It's called EVO Labs now. They're headed this way, but it has not looked very pretty. I talked to TerraTech about it. I wish they would do it. I think it would help, but I don't know if they will. And I talked to another. I don't think I should disclose it, but I talked to somebody else today, floated that idea, and they seem pretty receptive to it. The Canadian market just offers a lot more than the OTC.
Well, it allows institutional Canadian investors to invest, right? I mean, you're not seeing U.S. institutions some of the tiny ones are dipping their toe in, but the Canadians seem to be all in.
Yeah, I think a couple of years from now, this conversation will be very different. But for right now, I think the CSE Path is a pretty smart one.
Let's talk stock analysts for a sec. Who
Sure.
are the best ones out there? The ones in the banks that you respect? Who should the investor audience be paying attention to? Who do you read on a regular basis?
Yeah. So I wish these people would share their information with me. So I can't really. I'm not going to tell you who sends me some stuff. But
Fair enough.
But look, I think Vivian Azer does a really good job, and I respect where she's come from. But everybody needs to understand, in the United States, these analysts, if they're paying attention to the industry, and there's a few others, they're not really providing broad coverage on a stock level basis. It's more like for Vivian, she's, her main responsibilities are to cover tobacco and alcohol. And so she's coming at the space a little bit defensively for now. I'm sure over time things will change, but I think this whole federal illegality thing makes it really hard for her to really start covering the companies in the United States. So, and that would be the same case for some other people that are starting to penetrate from the United States. In Canada, without naming any names, and I think there are a lot of people that they're not 100% focused on the cannabis space, which I think can make it challenging because I can't even keep up, and I am 100% focused. And I think readers need to always understand, the readers of these papers need to understand kind of the inherent conflicts of interest in the investment banking type things that come out. And I found that not all, but most of the Canadian analysts are younger, haven't necessarily been through things like the 2000 meltdown or even the 2008 meltdown maybe. So they seem to be very optimistic, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and not tempered in their outlook.
So when you said that a lot of these analysts are covering it from a defensive position, do you mean like they're looking at the risks for other companies in either the tobacco or the alcohol space?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're looking at more of a macro level, top down, and even in Canada. So I think the industry's been covered by, I guess, what you would call middle tier investment bankers like Canaccord that have done really well. They might not like me calling them that, but they're not like the top tier in Canada. And so BMO just started covering the space, and if you read what they did, you're not going to make any money reading BMO research. You'll understand the industry very well. So you're starting to see some really well thought out research, but it's not really at the company level yet, and certainly not helping identify some under the radar company that's worth 2x or something like that, which we'll get there eventually. But right now, I'm not really seeing that. I think most of the thinking that's going on, the smartest people that I'm seeing, they don't share their things publicly, unfortunately. And we're seeing some people that are, investing other people's money, and they're doing the research, and they're out there in the field. They know a lot, and I try to have good relationships with those people.
So you introduced us to Danny Moses, who we just talked to last week, actually, and he's called this industry now the big long. Do you think
that's ironic? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, he comes from the Big Short, and
right.
and he was one of the smartest traders on the short side of the real estate bubble. He still thinks that there is. I think he described it as we're in the second or the third inning overall. I mean, are you still as?
Is he talking about in the United States, or is he talking about globally?
I think it was a bit of both. I mean, I think. Yeah. I mean, we didn't get into the Canadians as much with him as we did with you.
Yeah, I think he's more U.S. focused.
Yeah, he is. He's definitely long. Are you personally investing? Clearly not in the companies that you work with, but are you playing the markets as well?
Okay, so I continue to have this thing that people find either weird or comforting, but I've never invested in a public or private Canadian deal ever. I mean, I have enough conflicts of interest as it is running New Cannabis Ventures, but for me to do 420 Investor the way I like to do it, which is I don't want to front run. So if I owned a stock, it would make it really difficult for me to have model portfolios. So that's what it boils down to, not wanting to front run. So the answer is no, but I'm 100% invested. This is all I do, and I bet a certain amount of career risk, which seems to be working out so far. But so no is the answer to the question.
So speaking of career risk, in the past you've pointed out the lack of professionalism among the cannabis companies. Are you seeing a shift in that?
Oh, yeah. That's been a big story this year in terms of people coming from all sorts of industries. It's all of a sudden cool to work in the cannabis space. And a lot of my prior comments were, governance related and really more focused on just the way the OTC operates. And a lot of and then if you look past the public space and the private space, I'm still hearing there's a big problem in the industry, and it takes time to solve. You have on the one hand these financial types that come in, they're so smart and they think they know everything, and they don't. And then at the other time you have these people that they know how to grow weed, and they're so smart, and they're going to just make money because their weed is the best. They have the best grower. Come on. And so I think everybody's starting to realize something I've been talking about for a while, which is if you're going to invest, you better have both those angles covered. You better have people that really understand the industry and all the nuances, but also people that come from outside of industry. And I know you guys work with, Kush Bottles as a client, and I mean, there's a good example of a company that seems to be bridging a lot of that. And there's other examples as well. So, Ann, I think this has improved a lot, actually.
So let's pivot for a second, because the big uncertainty that's overhanging the industry is this regulatory uncertainty, right? I mean, there's this federal illegality
and even state, local.
Yeah, it's a real. But let's we've started to ask this of everybody now, which is let's go under the assumption that very soon this is all going to change, right?
I don't buy into that exactly, but okay, I'll give it.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you. So here, I'm going to give you my. I'm going to be John McLaughlin for a second, and I'm going to make a prediction and say, I think that this October. Yes, prediction. So I think this coming October, the president is actually going to move for a descheduling. That if the polls show that the Republicans are in for like literally getting swamped by a blue wave, that he's going to say, I'm going to claim pot for the GOP, and if I deschedule it, I can say we made pot legal, and since pot polls so high, 96% of Americans or 90-something% of Americans favor medicinal access, between 60 and 70% favor access to adult use, that he might think this is going to swing the polls. So now you're going to be Eleanor Clift.
Okay, well, I don't watch TV unless it's about cannabis. So
okay,
I don't even know who you're talking about. But,
that's okay. It's an old political roundtable. But what's your prediction? What's your timeline on this?
Yeah. So I think you and I talked about this. When was that? In June, when we had dinner, and there was a couple glasses of wine into it. And I respect where you're coming from and see it as a possibility, but I'm not on board that it's going to play out that way. It'd be interesting, and I'll say first of all, I'm not sure everybody wants it to play out that way. Selfishly, I mean. The person who just thinks people shouldn't be incarcerated and that this is all BS in me says, yeah, bring that on. The part that likes doing what I do every day is a little bit concerned, and the people that operate in the industry don't necessarily want change to happen that fast. They want some time to build their businesses without fear of larger, better capitalized, smarter companies coming in. So be careful what you wish for, I would say.
I'm not wishing for it.
Yeah,
it would, when the orange piece of shit does that, it's going to really bum me out.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. But well, the part of you, the
social justice person, the civil libertarian part says, it's stupid to continue to arrest people for smoking a joint, right?
Yeah.
But for somebody who is now in the industry, and you're right, because if it goes legal or descheduled tomorrow, Constellation isn't going to invest in Canopy. It's just going to buy Canopy.
Okay,
right?
Let me give you the counterpoint, because I think your thesis has some merit, that we could see this kind of what I would call a green swan event, where Donald Trump, like you said, senses something and decides to seize onto this issue.
So stealing that, by the way.
I was just going to say, show title.
Oh, yeah, people love when I say that. But so here's the deal. So I got really excited about Canada, and I didn't even know it was going to legalize. I just was really excited about it back in early October of 2015. I say early October. People say, why does he care if it's early? Because it was literally 2 weeks or maybe 10 days before the Canadian elections. And I had Bruce Linton and several other leading LP execs at a conference on a panel I was running. And I think in this room that held 250 people, if we had 20 people, it was a lot. And I'm sitting here like, this is a gold mine and nobody's even listening to it. And then 10 days later, of course, and it was a surprise, but Justin Trudeau won. And the reason I bring this up is Canada essentially decided to do exactly what Donald Trump you think is going to say and do. And here we are 3 years later, you still can't buy it, okay? So if it even plays out the way you're saying, Louis, I think it's very complicated, and they have so many issues that they need to parse in terms of who's going to regulate what, how's the taxation going to work, is it going to be a state by state, or if they do that, would it be a federally controlled thing? I think it's
100%, but if they do it, it takes all of the regulatory risk out of any U.S. company, right?
Eventually.
But if I'm holding, but even so, you're going to see a massive pop for companies like Kush or Ianthus or any of them, right? They're going to run.
Right, I agree with that.
So,
but they're not going to legalize on November 8th. It's going to, you know what I mean? If that were to even happen, it will take so long. I think we're even more complex than Canada, quite frankly, because in Canada you really didn't have a state legal system at all. You had basically it was starting from scratch, and here you have all these existing things that would need to be meshed out. And look at what's going on in California and soon I guess Michigan as well, where it's so easy to take a state like New York and go in there where there's nothing legal and make something crappy legal and then make it better and then eventually legalize. That's a great pathway. But when you have to go in a state like California or Michigan that have been, state legal but unregulated for all these years, and then you have to try to fix that, that's what it's going to look like if we go to federal legality, and it's going to take probably even longer than it took Canada.
Yeah, it's messy. I'm in California, and it's messy. It's very messy.
Oh, I didn't know you're in California. You're lucky.
I am.
Why
yes.
you root for the Mets?
I'm a Jersey girl, so I don't root for the Mets. My husband does, but
she roots for the Yankees.
I got it.
It's complicated.
It's not that complicated. It's very simple. Your husband's a Mets fan. You should be a Mets fan.
I know, but I watch way more Mets games than I do Yankee games. Just,
Hi, Steven.
Hey. So sticking with predictions, which we shouldn't be in the prediction business, but if you and Alan, I hear what you're saying that you don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but regardless of when it happens, what does day 1 look like after descheduling, and then what does day 2000 look like in the U.S.?
Oh wow, I think that's beyond my predictive skills. I can't even figure out what Canada's going to look like, and it's just a few months away.
Well, what do you think it'll be like in Canada day 1 then? Because you're getting so much excitement from the consumer level, at least.
Yeah.
Like it's a holiday, that will be a holiday. But but you're saying there's going to be this, it's going to be a cluster F, and there's no product and everything. So yeah,
no stores, no product, and not only no stores and no product like what they could have, they don't even have the right products. And I'm not blaming them. It is what it is. But, they're starting low and going slow. They're just having simple products, not the stuff people really want, like extracts and vape pens and edibles. So it already looked pretty bad that way. Ontario is the largest province by far in Canada. They don't even know what they're doing. And here we are, 2 months and 16 days away. They literally don't know what they're doing. Their original plan was extremely insufficient. 25 stores on day 1 for the largest province in Ontario. I wish I had these numbers at my fingertip, but it's something like 9 million people live in Ontario. I think that's off the top of my head. Big part of the Canadian population. What's that?
It's going to be quite a line.
Oh yeah. Well, so not that many stores. And not the right products. And then I've been tracking this inventory issue. And I just spoke to a major LP today. He said, "No, you're 100% right. Nobody's got the product." And so
how is that possible? They've known this is coming, and
no,
they're big
really.
Producers. But they're big producers, right? I mean,
no. I mean, think about what you'd be saying if it hadn't been legalized. There was. By the time the third reading came, it was pretty clear it was going to happen. But then it got delayed, by the way. But at that second reading, there was a huge shock. And people actually thought, and I guess it was possible, that they weren't going to legalize. And it was really on the table that this whole thing would be delayed. So when you don't know for sure that you have a market, you'd be an idiot to ramp up and have all that supply and make all that capital investment. But,
but all these Canadian companies put out releases saying we've got this many 1,000 grams of capacity that we just added. It's like, okay, they're all indoors. It only takes 3 to 4 months to grow.
We're not built out, and Health Canada is really slow to approve this stuff. There's a whole bunch of issues. So the bottom line is they're not where they think they are or where they want to be. And investors, I think, you were asking me earlier what's been the problem. I think this has been one of the issues that people have realized, because everybody's all excited. Oh, this is how big the market is, and it starts on this date. It just doesn't work that way.
So you think that the uncertainty of October 17th has been priced in, and that these companies have been punished, and that once they start to sell, that you might see a new appreciation in the Canadian LP stocks?
Probably a little bit less sophisticated than that. More like, will the day traders get re-energized as we get closer to legalization? Probably yes. But I don't think all that other stuff you said, which sounded good, is actually right. I think the numbers are
by the way, par for the course with me.
Yeah. So I do think there'll be some enthusiasm. And people should be enthusiastic in general, right? I mean, it's very exciting. But I just don't think look, there's I think 8 companies that have gone public in the last 6 or 7 weeks in Canada. I count 40, including Tilray, 40 now that are publicly traded. And, MedRelief just left, and Haiku's going to leave. So there's a little bit going back the other way. But Canopy Growth just did this massive convertible debt note. Afria, on the eve of a historic Senate vote in Canada to legalize, dumped the largest equity offering ever. I mean, insider selling is rampant. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to see what's going on here. You have really excited investors that have pretty much tapped out. And at the same time, you have companies still willing to raise capital. And it's the supply and demand, and the supply of stock's winning right now. So hopefully that changes in the fall.
My mother-in-law called me last week to ask me about Tilray. So it's definitely made the rounds on Long Island. Yes.
Is that because it was on the NASDAQ?
Yeah. And she's like, I heard about this company. What do you think? Should I invest? And I was like, I'm not the person to ask that question to, but.
I hate it. Everybody, all my friends ask me these investing questions, and I'm like, look, if your time horizon is 3 to 5 years, probably. If your time horizon is 3 to 5 months, I don't have a freaking clue.
Yep. I have a better answer than that, but
tell me.
I'm just saying that's what I do. I try to I had a definite view on Tilray, and I was kind of wrong. I thought it was quote unquote fairly priced, and I didn't expect. I certainly did not expect it to double. So, but it's a tight float, and these things can happen. And maybe I underappreciated just how stupid people can be, honestly.
Hold on. And for those of you who don't understand what a tight float means, it means that there's a restricted number of shares that are actually available for retail investors to buy, that most of the company is being held by the executives within the company.
Yeah, no, in this it's even worse because the only shares that could trade were the shares that just traded, literally. So, there was no way that you could short the stock safely. There's no way. So they were smart the way they did it. It's not necessarily smart in the long run. We've seen T-God come out with a very tight float, and that was a TSX listed IPO, one of the few that we've seen.
And that's the Green Organic Dutchman.
Correct. And so, what did they do? They came out with this tight float, the stock runs up, and they do an equity offering. It's even better. I mean, geniuses, right? So I don't want to criticize them too much, their client, but this is, I don't know. It's, I spend my time looking for good deals, not looking for bad deals that may get better. And I did not think Tilray was that great of a deal, and yet it doubled. So it just shows you the guru doesn't always get it right. But, I'm not so short-term focused either. So,
but is that 3 to 5 year horizon a good thing? Like, I hope our audience aren't day traders, but for the people who are actually interested in the long-term horizons, is that what you're thinking, or are you thinking shorter term?
Yeah, no, me personally, I can't think that far out. I get it, and people will criticize what I'm about to say, and they'll just say, Alan, if you'd have just bought Canopy and just that's all you did a couple of years ago, well, obviously with hindsight, that would have been pretty smart, right? But that's not how you build a diversified portfolio, and nobody knows the future. And so I use something extensively in my model portfolios called trading around the core, and so which is basically find the companies you think are worth owning, and sometimes you own more of it, and other times you own less, just depending on what's going on. And Canopy was a great example, and I didn't get it right, by the way, exactly, but I don't remember the exact sequence, but I had little or no exposure, and it was really sinking. Hard to believe if you go back and look at it, but it was around $6.50, $7 in Canada just a year and 2 months ago, a year and 1 month ago. And I loaded the boat, and my subscribers love when I use the word pound the table because I don't use it very often. And so I basically loaded up my model portfolios and quote unquote pounded the table to really try to say, hey, this is a good company at a great price, and you need to be paying attention. And of course, it tripled or something like that, and I'm out, and then it doubles. So I look stupid, but that's the way it works. But that's really what I think. For a lot of the listeners, they probably don't get to focus on things as tightly as I do or we do. So, maybe that thinking longer term, because you're not going to really be in a position to always be evaluating things. But I actually think in an industry like this, which is truly startup, it really is. I mean, even Canopy Growth is a startup. It's a little more advanced. Do you really want to have the hubris to say that who's going to be good 3 to 5 years from now? I don't. So.
Well, and can we ask you to plug your newsletter so people like my mother-in-law can hear from you?
Depends. Is she going to bother me? No,
She is not, I swear.
Because I hear she bothers you a lot. And
my God, she's wonderful. There's no complaints here. I got so lucky, but I will not give her your phone number.
There you go. No, I'm just kidding. My mother-in-law, believe it or not, I was at Thanksgiving. I will give you that in a second. But I was at Thanksgiving, and she lives in New Mexico, and so I saw her, and we were just engaged in a longer conversation than normal. And she knows obviously what I do, and she started telling me that she owns 2 cannabis companies. I'm like, really? I'm like,
she didn't tell you before that?
Never told me before. And so I was asking her which ones. They're both clients of KCSA. I'll leave it at that. But and I thought they were good choices for what she was trying to do. And she's definitely not a trader or anything like that. And well, I gotta be careful because people might figure out who she is. But she told me something about buying Bitcoin too. I was like, whoa. But anyway.
Oh, dude, my 15-year-old son was like, Daddy, you must invest in Ripple. I'm like, I don't even like that wine.
It's funny. Wine. So to answer your question, 420 Investor, it's 420investor.com. And there's 2 versions. There's the full version, and then there's also a monthly newsletter that's probably more appropriate for the longer term thinkers, but for people that like direction, the full service.
And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes, so you don't have to write it down. And let's talk about Benzinga for a second. You are working with them for their first cannabis investment conference in Toronto in mid-August.
I have to stop you. It is actually not their first conference. I don't know if they're calling it that.
Just kidding, no. Alan. I was just testing you.
No, because it's really funny. This shows you how long I've been at this. So, we were talking about cannabis years and dog years. So in 2014, my partners at Benzinga, they're the ones that are my partner on. They're a Detroit-based financial media company. They are my partners for 420 Investor. They do the customer service and the billing and platform technology. And so we decided to do a conference. It was called Weedstock, which I would never use that name again. But we did that in 2014. It was a crap fest, the worst companies ever. But they were the best of the worst companies, if that makes sense. But people loved it. And from that, I've been involved with a lot of other conferences, most recently New West, which Phil Carlson from KCSA really helped out a lot with, and he's going to be working on that again this year. And so we've evolved, and they reached back out to me this year because they've had a lot of success with a fintech conference that they do in New York City annually. And so we decided that the time is now right. So yeah, the conference is August 17th is the full day, and there's a networking reception the night before, and they've got some great companies there. I think there's like 27 presenting companies plus a bunch of panels, and I mean, it looks fantastic to me. I'm really excited about it.
Okay, Alan, so since you are a returning champion and you've already done Puff Puff Pass, you're going to have to do it again, but we need 2 new puffs and 1 new pass. So what are the 2 things that you still absolutely love about the cannabis industry and the one thing that's driving you nuts?
So I don't even know what I said last time. It might be the exact same things, but I think one of the things I love about it is just how much things are changing every day. And while it's not always in the right direction, we get curveballs all the time. I see the progress, having been at this for full-time now for over 4 years and part-time for over 5 years. So I think the dynamic nature of the industry is really exciting. And then I mentioned, I think last time, I'm now remembering, and this is still something that really resonates with me. I feel like in a lot of corporate America, we're still struggling with things like glass ceilings and discrimination and, old boys network. And there's a little bit of that in the cannabis industry, and it's not perfect, I know, but it really does seem to be a progressive industry. And while we've all, we're all familiar with the stigma of cannabis, I think that has really passed us now. And I think the industry, what I really like about it is it's really a progressive industry that's open to everybody compared to other industries. What do I not like? Look, I still spend way too much of my time having to call out these scammers, and I I enjoy it actually in a sick way, but I'd rather be focusing my time more constructively. Unfortunately, I feel it's my duty to call things out still, and I wish there was less of that. So,
is there anybody you want to throw under the bus right now? Because I got my foot on the gas, and anybody, I'm happy to back over them.
Oh well, I should be careful. I was sued once for $100 million, and it cost me a little bit of money to get out of that. But obviously, it was a stupid lawsuit, and that company's now bankrupt. But I'm going to be more broad on this, and there's companies out there that don't file with the SEC, and this is just killing me. This has been going on too long, and some of these companies have said they would file with the SEC. The one I'd throw under the bus right now is a company called Pot Networks. I just wrote about them recently. They're trying to change their name to Hemp Biotech. Always a good idea. I mean, they've changed their name about 10 times in the last 10 years.
Wait, I thought it was going to be Crypto Hemp Biotech.
Yeah, well, probably that too. But so they, and of course everybody wants to blame somebody else, but this story is hilarious. They've been telling everybody for so long that they're going to get their numbers audited and that they were going to uplist. And okay, to their credit, they got an auditor, which is more than like Medical Marijuana Inc. has ever apparently done. But they went with somebody that was facing litigation, and literally the week that they got this audit that I looked at, and I'd seen it before, but it was finally submitted to the SEC, and it was a joke. I'm not an accountant, but I know enough to know it was just rife with errors. And so they shouldn't have used this company. It was not a real accounting company. And what ended up happening was they lost their PCAOB certification, and they had to pull back the filing. And so my timing looked pretty good on that, because a week later the stock had dropped like 25%. But I just think there's a lot of companies, and they, one of the reasons they bother me is they're just so promotional. And we're seeing, I don't mean to pick on just them, because there's a lot of these companies out there, and they just suck up the air. And there's a lot going on positive in the space. And for these companies to go out there, they don't file with the SEC, and they're very suspicious looking businesses. It takes away from all the positivity.
Wow. Well, let's finish on a positive note. Thank you. It's always a real, honestly, talking with you, it's such a great experience. One, you're totally a great guy, and you've been a good friend to both me and Phil and to the firm, but more importantly, you're really, really educational. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't read your stuff or encounter you that doesn't say, wow, that guy knows a lot, and he's really accessible, and so
I appreciate that.
We're going to want you back again, and we'll
Always
do it.
happy.
Let's do it after elections and see if I was right.
That'll be great. You can rub it in my face if you're right. We'll, more importantly, we'll figure it out. If it does play out that way, we'll figure it out.
I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
I don't know. I kind of hope you're right for the civil, libertarian, social justice issues.
Yeah.
But.
Well, all right. So thank you to Alan Brochstein of Ford 20 Investor and New Cannabis Ventures. And if you guys don't have his app on your phone, it is truly must read. Alan can be found on Twitter at Invest420, and he is all over Facebook and LinkedIn, and we'll make sure to have a list of all the places to read his work and get in touch with Alan. No phone numbers, so nobody can track him down, but they'll all be in our show notes. And if you want to chat with me or Ann, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle at GreenRushComms. We are also
Nope.
At? What do you
That
know?
is not our handle.
Excuse me. That's what it says in the script.
Oh, that's not right.
You said read the out. Did you not say read the outro?
We are a professional podcasting organization, Alan.
Yeah, I hear that. That's all right. I said CSE and OTC. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. All right, no,
We'll fix it.
Yes. No. It's at KCSA_cannabis, as well as on our website, which is www.kcsa-cannabis.com.
And by the way, Nick Opich, our extraordinary producer, fixed it on the fly, in the script, real time. Thank you, Google Docs. You can also drop us an email. This is correct, which is at greenrush@kcsa.com. And please do us all a favor. If you like listening to me sound like an ass, subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcatcher. And that, my friends, that's one take, Shay. One take.